Welcome back. This is the Kelly Roach Show, and I have such a treat for you today. I have the founder and the creator of the Personal Development School, Thais Gibson, here with me today. Hey, Thais, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here. And, we're going to talk about a lot of different things today, but it's a really cool story about how you even came to become the founder of the Personal Development School. You have a private practice. It's booked out with a 2-year wait list. Who doesn't want to see that happen? And then leap forward to having 35,000 students and members in 117 countries, courses, 60 courses, all different strategic insights to help people grow in so many different areas of life. So, give us a little bit of the backstory on how you got into this type of work, what your mission is with the Personal Development School, and then I know we're going to talk a little bit today about different attachment styles and some of the things that you think you can really help our listeners with to help them to achieve their goals.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah. For me, I think one of the first things that just was, a great ingredient was that I was so clear that I loved something so much. So I was just super passionate. I love to teach. I love to share. So I was really comfortable putting myself out there a lot. And really, I think that's what led to the 2-year wait list is I was just so passionate that even outside of seeing clients, I would give these free workshops all the time just to like share and teach more. And eventually that became all these new people all the time. We'd have the workshops fill up. Sometimes we had 150 people come. And of course, a lot of those individuals would be like, oh, do you see one-on-one clients? And I would put people on a wait list. So it built out really quickly that way. And I think that key ingredient of just being in alignment was so big because I feel like when we're in alignment with something and passionate about something, it's so much easier to be okay with putting yourself out there and sort of weathering the challenges and the different things that can cause you to originally feel a little bit afraid. So that was really helpful for me. And then eventually it just became, well, I'm teaching all these workshops. And the same thing I would hear all the time after workshops is people would be like, why don't they teach this stuff in school? And one of the big focus areas of the workshops was the fact that your conscious mind is responsible for roughly 3 to 5% of all of your beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and actions, while your subconscious mind, your habituated, conditioned, programmed self, is responsible for 95 to 97%. And so, what that meant is like we were talking so much about how you can rewire your subconscious mind, leveraging neuroplasticity. We know that that's a thing. So, a lot of people were like, wait, why don't they teach this in school? And that would become a thing over and over again. And eventually I was like, I'm going to create a personal development school. And it was really just listening to people and really hearing, where they're coming from, what people's needs were, really paying attention and caring about that. And also trying to solve for the problem of having a 2-year wait list and people getting frustrated with me for waiting for so long. So we started just putting a little bit of content on YouTube to seeing how it would take. And again, we really listened to our audience. And when we specifically started focusing on the subconscious mind and how we can actually rewire our attachment style and how we show up in relationships. So whether that be workplace relationships, family relationships, friendships, and of course, romantic relationships, if we had maladaptive patterns, if we learned unhealthy things, then, and for some people that was arguing all the time in relationships was the norm, right? Because that was how they were conditioned. And so when we really got people to see their own individual patterns and then rewire them, that just really landed with people. And so that, allowed our YouTube channel to grow at a pretty rapid rate. And then from there, we packaged all of our different courses and materials. And really the mission is to empower people to be able to heal themselves and to not feel like there's all this dependency fostered on a system where it's like, okay, in order to come in for counseling or therapy, you have to come in once a week for the rest of your life just to feel okay. Like, no, 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 let's get to the root cause. Let's learn what patterns are not working for us and how we can change them.
Yeah, it's the future. I love it so much. I love it so much. And that's exactly what we all want to do is lead people through the transformation, but ultimately have them unlock their own power that they already have. And I love that you're doing that. It's amazing. So let's dig in and talk a little bit about these attachment styles because obviously everyone listening to this show wants to grow. They want to grow personally, they want to grow professionally. And sometimes that means exploring the parts of ourselves that we don't even realize we have all sorts of things going on that are maybe standing in the way of our highest level of success or joy or satisfaction in life. So why don't you first kind of give us an overview of what this even, means and looks like, and then we can talk a little bit about the 4 different styles that you've uncovered.
Yeah, definitely. So your attachment style is really the subconscious way that you've learned to connect to other people. And that comes from your conditioning in childhood. So for some individuals, they learn, okay, connection and closeness is about distance. We stay really hyper independent. We don't lean on people too much. We never really rely on people. For other people, they learn, okay, well, connection is about constantly being there for each other, always being in each other's space. And that's going to be how things are all day long, every day. And so, what I like to think of our attachment style as is really that subconscious set of rules you learn in regards to how to relate to other people. But when you take this and you put this in different sort of seasons of life, or you put this in different aspects of life, if somebody has a different attachment style than somebody else, it's not much different than playing a board game and having different rules for how the board game's supposed to work. Like you have the rules for Monopoly and I have the rules for Scrabble, and we sit down to play the game. And like, even if we want to get along and relate, if we have different subconscious rules for how it's supposed to go, there's just going to be more chaos. And so, of course, our attachment style affects our romantic relationships, but it really affects our workplace relationships as well, because ultimately it's the relationship you have to yourself and it's going to go everywhere with you. And so you'll see from the four major attachment styles, there are four overall, and every single person has an attachment style for those who are not familiar. And about 50% of the population is securely attached. So this is something that's really interesting about this is it also mirrors the divorce rate in North America. So about 50% of people in divorce. And there's a lot of research to really correlate your relationship not working out with having an insecure attachment style. So we have our secure individuals, and they are secure because growing up, their conditioning is they get a lot of what we call approach-oriented behavior in psychology. And what this means is that their caregivers are number one attuned to them. So they notice when the child's distressed, they notice when something is off. And number two, when they see the child being off, they go and they try to help fix or solve for it with them. And what this actually creates as a byproduct is a child going, okay, I'm worthy of having my needs met from others. It's safe to rely on other people. I can trust that people will be there for me. It's okay to have negative emotions, and I can communicate them and share them and have good outcomes. And as a result of this child grows up to have those healthy skills. They learn to communicate effectively. They address things head on. They're comfortable with their emotions. They learn to self-regulate, and they have healthy boundaries and they know how to work through conflict. And then we have the other 50% of the population really broken down into three insecure attachment styles. And on one hand, we have our anxious attachment style. Anxiously attached individuals in romantic relationships tend to be really needy or clingy because as children, they were really afraid of abandonment. And so as adults, what you'll actually see is not only is that affecting their romantic relationship, but in the workplace, they people please too often, often to the point of burnout. They don't have boundaries. They put themselves last. They sometimes say yes to things that should be a no for them. And they're not really living authentically a lot of the time. And this can lead to burnout, resentment, frustration, and they really care a little bit too much about what people think. So they're less likely to take risks if within that risk, there's the risk of losing approval. On the other hand, we have our dismissive avoidant, which is almost the opposite of the anxious attachment style. The dismissive avoidant is somebody who usually had to be hyper independent as a child. So usually their childhood was marked by some form of emotional neglect. And sometimes they had a really stable childhood, but just the parents were not emotionally available. So food was on the table, structure, order, everything was there. But when the child was distressed, it was like, oh, go into the other room or go deal with it yourself or good luck, go figure it out. And so this child learned, okay, when I'm vulnerable and when I have emotions, it doesn't get met with positive reinforcement. It gets met with negative reinforcement. And as a result, they adapt to this by going, okay, well, then I'm just not going to be vulnerable and I'm not going to have emotions. And so in romantic relationships, they usually end up being individuals who sabotage closeness, feel scared of opening up, really leave relationships when people get too close or when things feel too real. But in workplace relationships, they never ask for help. They never, put themselves in situations where they could become too uncomfortable or feel too vulnerable. They usually don't like stretching as much outside of their comfort zone. They move more slowly and methodically towards things. And some of these things can be strengths, right? Like your anxious attachment style, they can get along really well with people because they're great with other people and they're good team players. Your dismissive avoidance, they're really thorough and practical and, analytical. But of course, you can see the weaknesses in there too. And then the very last one is the fearful avoidant attachment style. And the fearful avoidant usually grows up by a childhood full of chaos. So this could be a parent with a personality disorder or a mental health issue. This could be a parent with alcoholism or an active addiction, or it could be a dynamic where a parent is, just really unhealthy. Maybe they're fighting all the time. And so this child grows up usually learning to fend for themselves quite well. They usually are like really good at rolling with the punches and operating outside of their comfort zone. A lot of the time, they make good entrepreneurs as adults because they had to grow up really fast. They're used to dealing with chaos and figuring things out, but they often struggle to trust. They're often very hypervigilant. They can walk on eggshells a lot. And they can burn themselves out because they'll often people please other people until they get frustrated enough and feel like they've done too much. And then they get angry and they become sort of a volcano erupting. And this can cause them as adults to leave jobs out of the blue all of a sudden, get
Mm.
into conflict more frequently than other individuals, or be just overly defensive when it comes to receiving feedback. So those are the four attachment styles and sort of how they show up in the workplace as well.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. This is so fascinating and I see it. So what do you do about it?
It's a great question.
So everyone's listening and they're like, oh shit. They like see themselves, right? And they're like, well, I think I'm a little bit of this and I think I'm a little bit of that. But once you start seeing this and you start identifying these things that you didn't even know were driving your behaviors and the quality of your relationships, then what?
Yeah, great question. So there's a fairly long framework that I give to people. Maybe we can just touch on like the key points of it.
Yeah.
But it's CNEBCB, and what it stands for, it's how to actually rewire your subconscious mind in regards to your attachment style. So the first thing is your core wounds, which are like your triggers. Okay. So for example, the anxious attachment style, they're always afraid of being abandoned. The dismissive avoidant, they're afraid of being trapped or engulfed or being helpless if they rely on other people. The fearful avoidant, they're afraid of being abandoned or having trust broken, right? They all have different specific core wounds. Okay. Your core wounds are just your triggers, essentially, the things that will trigger you the most, but you're not born with them. They actually get conditioned into you through repetition and emotion over time. So, what happens is what we have to be able to do is if we have a big core wound, and there's different ways you can really rewire this, but just one simple, easy one is if you have a core wound, for example, of being trapped, then one thing you want to look for is the moment you feel triggered, like you're trapped, we have to be able to step out of that and be like, where do I have freedom to choose right now? So we have
Yeah.
to actively look for the opposite and work to action that out. And
Yeah.
sometimes that freedom is to set a boundary, or sometimes that freedom is to, communicate through a problem with somebody, or sometimes that freedom is, if you feel confined, like everything is piling up on you at work. Sometimes, okay, where do I have freedom to go communicate with my boss and ask for help, right? So we're looking to actively move towards things that will create the opposite of that trigger. And if we do that through repetition and emotion, and that becomes a new habit, repetition and emotion fires and wires neural pathways, which eventually create neural networks and actually recondition those original wounds or triggers. So that's step one, is working through those core wounds or triggers. The next one is knowing your needs. Now, each attachment style has specific needs. And you'll see, for example, the anxious attachment in the workplace, they need validation, they need reassurance, they need certainty, and they do really well with teamwork and inclusion and collaboration. That's where they thrive because they're people, they love people. So we want to play to our strengths. And by knowing our needs, we enable ourselves to be like, okay, what kind of environment do I want to put myself in for a career? Or how can I ask for more of these needs to be met at work? Because that's where you're going to thrive and see a lot more growth. So that's for your anxious. Dismissive avoidance, a lot of their needs, they like their independence and autonomy. If they feel micromanaged, they're going to get out of there so fast. So making sure that they carve out space for freedom and autonomy. And they also have needs around appreciation and acknowledgement. So getting positive feedback is important to them as well in sincere ways. And making sure that they're in environments where they have the ability to really, a lot of their strengths are that they're very analytical, logical, practical, thorough. So making sure that they're in environments like that really play into those skill sets is huge.
Mm.
Fearful avoidance, they often operate through their big needs. They like novelty, they like growth. They don't do very well with the mundane or with things being too similar all the time. So
Yeah.
if they're in a career that allows them to operate out of their comfort zone, make sure that they're always growing, that they're being challenged. They actually thrive under challenge. And so playing to our needs is huge. So that's only two of our few. The other big pieces are to regulate our nervous system. I mean, just doing work to make sure we're more in parasympathetic nervous system mode, or rest and digest, breath work, meditation, those types of things that just help regulate. If you grew up in an unstable environment of any kind, you're going to be a little more dysregulated than a securely attached person. And then the other big pieces are boundaries and healthy communication. So learning to actually practice healthy boundaries is huge. And then being able to put yourself in a position where you learn to communicate effectively. Like so often when I was running my practice, I would have people come in and they would be like, Thais, I communicate to all the people in my life. Nobody listens to me, and they would complain. And then we would look at their communication. And a lot of times people just don't even realize that they're negatively framing all the time. So saying things like, you don't care about me, you never text me enough, you never spend enough time with me, rather than saying, hey, I'm feeling disconnected lately. I'd love to spend some quality
Yes.
time this weekend. Let's plan something fun on Saturday. And so when we're able to, there's this old saying, behind every criticism is a need. And when we're able to actually realize, hold on, criticism isn't getting me heard. It's definitely not effective in the workplace. It doesn't come across at all. Let's
Yeah.
actually reframe, find the underlying need that's here, frame it in the positive for what we do want instead of what's not happening. And that really improves our ability to communicate and work through things with others.
Yeah, so good. So good. So I have a question for you. This is so powerful. And my question is, of all the things that you teach in the personal development school, which obviously is very broad, and there's so many topics that you're touching on, why did you choose this as a focal point right now? Like, you obviously saw that this was holding people back and making, a substantial impact, but like, how did you decide that this was something that you wanted to really go deeper on and get out? For example, like coming on podcast to share about this particular topic, you could have picked 1,000 topics that you teach in the school. Why do you feel like this has such a substantial impact on people evolving, to you talked about self-healing, right? And getting to where you want to be, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think from a personal perspective, there's sort of three layers to it. From a personal perspective, I'm extra passionate about this because I was a fearful avoidant growing up. So I was the hot and cold, the outside of your comfort zone, grew up in a lot of chaos, had to adapt. And there's certain parts of that where you build strengths, but then there's also parts of it where like I would, when I was much younger, I would leave jobs all of a sudden, or I would get into conflict a lot, or I would get frustrated and I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. And I realized like your attachment style more than anything is the relationship that you have to yourself. So what I love about it is that when you're looking at how to actually rewire, how to actually change these patterns and habituate in a new attachment style, new way of being, you're actually being able to work through triggers, learn your needs, learn how to self-soothe or emotionally regulate, communicate, and set better boundaries. And if you can do those five things, which the attachment style will sort of be the umbrella for breaking down these five aspects of your life, you're going to change as a person and all relationships will change as a result, starting with yourself. And if you can do that, if you can regulate, get rid of your triggers, actually soothe yourself, communicate better, have healthy boundaries, your whole life will transform. So, what I love about it is it really covers this broad scope of these root cause issues that we carry in our lives that lead to burnout or conflict or, just constantly being emotionally dysregulated. And by knowing your attachment style, you can unpack and rewire those core things.
I love that. It's giving people the power in their hands to shift how they're showing up in the world to change everything else that they're experiencing when they're interacting with other people. And I think so often the way of our world is like, I'm a victim. There's all these reasons why this isn't what I want it to be. And you're actually putting the power back in people's hands to say, no, actually, like everything you're experiencing is being driven by how you're showing up, how you're interacting, who you're being, and you have the power to elevate that. I won't say change that because we want to lean into our strengths, we want to keep growing, but to elevate how you're showing up. And it's going back to what you said about, marriages and so many divorces. It's like start with being the person that someone wants to be married to. Right. Then maybe once you do that work, then it's like, okay, then work on, what do you want to communicate that you want them to change, right? But there's always a lot of work that we can do on ourselves first, I feel like, right?
I love that. I love that. And I think it's so true. I'm so of that mentality. And I grew up being somebody who was kind of like, oh, I'm the victim. I went through all these things. And it wasn't until I realized, like, hold on, no one's here to save me. I better figure it out for
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah,
And really took
100%.
accountability how life-changing getting out of that mindset was. And so I always say to people, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Like only you
Yes.
can really fix it. And so I'm such a
So
believer
good.
in that. And I think that's really where that power lies in our lives.
It's so good. Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so, so good. So most of your students just individuals that want to work on their personal growth? Is that who most of the students in the personal development school are?
Yes. So we have two major sort of aspects of PDS. So the first one is the vast majority of our students come in, they just want to do personal growth work. So they go
Okay.
through the courses and then we have all these supportive events. So every day we have a peer support group and a live webinar where people can come in, ask their questions. We talk about different topics in more detail. So we have like all these support mechanisms Monday through Saturday for individuals that just want that extra support system and along with the 65 courses. And then we have another branch where we actually certify people to become a certified and accredited relationship coach. And it's all about how to really change your attachment style and heal those patterns.
Very cool. Oh my gosh, so good. Okay, so if people want to learn more about their attachment styles, about the personal development school, they want to learn from you and they want to find out more, what do they do next?
So they can go to personaldevelopmentschool.com and we have a free attachment style quiz there that comes with like a huge report, really in depth about all your wounds or triggers and fears and all these different things. And then also I put pretty much daily content on YouTube at personal development school dash Thais Gibson. And then we're also on Instagram, which is at personal development underscore school.
So good. Oh my gosh, this is fascinating. I feel like just going to go download everything and just go deep. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and for the work that you're doing, just empowering people to be self-led. I think that's one of the most important thing as leaders that any of us can do is allow people to see the power that they have to make their dreams come true, to live the life that they want, to get to where they want to be. And you and I definitely share that in common in our work. So I love that so much. So thank you for joining, guys. We will put all the links down below that Thais mentioned. Definitely go follow her on social, go check out the YouTube channel and make sure that you fill out the quiz because this is just about growing. It's about growing ourselves, growing our outcomes, and elevating our relationships in every area of life. So thank you, Thais, for everything that you shared today. Absolutely fantastic conversation. For everyone listening, please take the time to share this episode with someone that you know that it will make an impact for. So sharing is caring, and the way that we keep the show commercial free is by having you share it with other people that you can make a difference for by simply passing along a podcast episode. So thanks so much for being here. We'll see you all back here in just a couple days.
Thank you so much for having me.